Alright, my topic is prison disenfranchisement. So my main claim is that denying prisoners the right to vote is harmful to society. Alright, so disenfranchisement is removing one's right to vote, for those who don't know that. And so right now, the current voting rights, here, let me tell you the current voting rights right now. In 2 states, Vermont and Maine, felons are allowed to vote. In 15 states, prisoners can, 15 states don't allow prisoners to vote while they are incarcerated. 28 states, 28 states disenfranchise prisoners until their full sentence is done, including probation and parole. And 9 states remove voting privileges completely unless restored by court action. So let me give you a little preview. So I'm going to be talking about how disenfranchisement is harmful towards prisoner rehabilitation and democracy. So first, let me clear up that prison is meant to rehabilitate, not punish. According to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is a key international human rights treaty providing a range of protections for civil and political rights, all persons deprived of their liberty shall be treated with humanity and respect for the inherent dignity of the human person. They also say that the penitentiary system shall comprise treatment of prisoners as the essential aim being their reformation and social rehabilitation. And this treaty was ratified and is now considered federal law. Alright. My first claim is that disenfranchisement is harmful towards rehabilitation. And I have a quote from Mandeep Dami, who has a PhD in psychology, from her scientific journal. Alright. Disenfranchisement serves to increase the social distance between the offender and the community and reaffirms his or her feelings of alienation and isolation. This may impede his or her acceptance and respect of the social norms and rule of law. If prisoners had the right to vote, they would begin to perceive themselves as useful, responsible, trusted, and law-abiding citizens. This could encourage their rehabilitation and help them to reintegrate into society after release. And my second point is that disenfranchisement is harmful to democracy. Christopher Uggan and Jeff Manza, both professors of sociology, in their article of Consequences of Felon Disenfranchisement in the United States, found 4.7 million prisoners were disenfranchised in 2000, and an estimate of 70% would have voted Democratic. And if 30% of them had voted, there would have been a net increase of over 500,000 Democratic votes. This information shows that if prisoners were allowed to vote, they could change the outcome in a large way, maybe even changing that outcome up for presidencies. So to summarize, disenfranchisement is harmful to rehabilitation and democracy.
All right, claims labeled. There's no preview. That's a little bit of a problem. It sounds controversial. The explanation on the first point on rehabilitation, you do have the explanation that rehabilitation is supposed to be the goal, and I think that people will accept that to some degree. The notion that it's the only goal, I think, is perhaps problematic, and we're getting into some value arguments here, so you want to be a little bit careful about that. The notion that being able to vote is going to enhance rehabilitation. You've got one authority that you cite here. It's very theoretical in nature. There's not any other data to support it except for that author's opinion, and so that I think is not particularly convincing. Well, there's no data about the number of people who, what percentage of them voted before they were arrested and incarcerated. For example, in those states where they even allow people while they're in prison to vote, where's the data that talks about what percentage of them vote? I didn't see anything that suggested that that makes a difference. The information on the second point basically comes down to this would be a good thing because the Democrats would do better. I'm not exactly sure that that's a convincing argument for anybody who sees the Democrats as being problematic. If you're on the other side, they're going to say, yeah, that sounds like a good argument against doing this. So I think you want to make the argument suggestive that more widespread participation is important, that the greater the franchise is, the more representative the democracy is, that kind of thing, instead of turning it into kind of a political thing, which I think is automatically going to distance some people from the point that you're talking about. There's a lot of reading in the presentation. Like I said, it feels very speculative on the first point. And there's not any source for the factual data you have at the beginning, although I think that it probably sounds accurate, where you're listing all of the different rules and procedures under which people vote. Another place, for example, I think you could have used some information is in those states where they allow people to return to voting after they've completed their sentences. Do we have some data on what the voting patterns are in those situations? Or, for example, of 9 states where they have to get a court order to get back in that, well, how many people pursue that? That's another place that would show that, in fact, this is something that is an incentive for people to return to the normative area. Like I said, you're on the brink of some value arguments here, and so you've got to be a little bit careful. All right, thank you. Thank you all for your patience.